So once your scene is fully complete, so you got all the assets in there and the lighting in there, you'll might want to take a screenshot of this or get an image of your scene to showcase off in your portfolios or to a potential employee, etc. Now, if I took a screenshot right now, obviously we'd see the whole sort of Maya interface, which you don't want. We just want to see our environment. So how do we do that? Well, what we can do is we can render out the image. Rendering being just taking like a nice high quality image of the scene. So taking all this information here and digitizing it into pixels that can be saved out as a PNG or a JPEG or a PSD, etc. So the two main icons we look at today is this one here and this one over here as well. So if you hover over them, it'll tell you what it is. So this is the render current frame. So basically we're going to get a nice high quality image of what the camera is seeing right now, and the render settings as well. So if I'm just going to bring this up, render settings, and also the render review. And so right now you can see that I've already done a pre-made render of the scene right now. So you can see what the image is. So you see it's nice high quality image. There's none of the sort of information, like for example, you don't really see the icons here, any of the UI stuff. It's just a pure digital representation of the scene right now. Underneath it gives you some information, so it tells you the resolution / size of the frame. So you can see this is like a full 1080p image, what perspective it is, and what renderer we are using. So there's two options we got here. We've got Hardware 2.0, which is kind of more like sort of real-time rendering, what it would actually look like in say a game, and Arnold renderer, which is more sort of like a high quality, super realistic renderer, mainly for use for like say films and TV and that kind of stuff, or if you want to do like a really nice looking image. Hardware 2.0 is probably the best one to use because it's easy to use and it also gives a bit more of a more realistic, in quotation marks, representation of what this scene would like in a game engine, for instance. So if you ever want to render out a scene, all you got to do is just click this little icon here and it renders out whatever you got. So for instance, if I just quickly just rotate this slightly, press this, you see that it renders out the new angle here. Now, depending on how you change the settings around and what render you're using, so for instance, if you're using Arnold or the Mental Ray, for instance, the rendering process can take a while. So just a standard image may take maybe a couple of minutes to even a couple of hours, depending on how high detailed you're making this particular image. Luckily, we don't really need to go into sort of high depth with these images, so the default settings are usually okay. So really quickly, we're going to look at the rendering settings. So right now we're on Maya Hardware 2.0. So we've got the Commons tab, which is same for anything. So if I go to Vector, if I go to Arnold, it'll be exactly the same. The Commons is always the same one. Commons is the basics of information of the image that you're going to render out, or animation. So you have file output, so what kind of file type it's going to be, from a JPEG to a PSD to a PNG, etc. Frame range, again, this is if you're rendering out more than one frame. This is mainly for sort of animation, so we don't have to look at that right now. Renderable cameras, so what is the renderer going to render from? So is it rendering from the perspective camera, or maybe a new camera that you've added into your scene, for instance? And important is the image size. So there's some presets here, so you can go full 4K image, or 4K square at the very least. You got like sort of HD 540, HD 720, full 1080p. You can actually go custom as well. You go to custom, you can put in your own width and height in there as well. What I always say is sometimes when you're finishing a scene, you might want to do like a test render. Never render out at say a high resolution because it will take a while. What I would advise to do is render out one of these two settings just to do a quick sort of taster to see, okay, I'm liking the composition, I'm liking how the scene looks right now. And you know, obviously if you're playing around with the settings here, you can get a quick feel for this scene and then do your high resolution image afterwards. So let's go to Hardware 2.0 settings. So this is basically the actual render settings to say, okay, how is Maya going to render out the scene? How is it going to make it look? So we have a couple of options here. So we have, for instance, ambient occlusion, screen space ambient occlusion, which kind of adds those sort of nice subtle shadows to the scene. So if I just quickly highlight here, if I enable that, you might have noticed, okay, there's some more definition of lighting and shadowing on the scene here to give more form to the scene. You can see that's on, that's off. So we can turn that on, for instance. Anti-aliasing as well, so you can go multi-sample anti-aliasing to obviously get rid of sort of jagged lines to make it seem a bit more smoother. So we're going to have a look around here. You'll see if I turn, it says right now it's off. Turn it on, you can see that it's kind of smoothed out a little bit. Yeah, you can definitely see it around here as well, actually. And you can change the settings for that as well. And any sort of motion blur and other render options that you want. So if I quickly just render it out right now with the anti-aliasing on and the ambient occlusion, we hopefully should see a difference when we render it again. So I think there's a slight difference. You can see that it is a bit more smoother. There's some of the ambient occlusion there as well. Just for comparison's sake, let's just turn it off just to see if we can see much of a difference. I can kind of see a bit of a difference. It does seem a bit more jaggedy around here. It's not as highly detailed as before. Again, it's just the subtle differences that really make it stand out. Yeah, you can kind of see it there. And the render options as well, which is really good for Hardware 2.0, is you can also say how it's rendering out. So right now it's on shaded and textured. So for instance, we can go to like say wired, render it out, and it will just show us the wireframe. So we've got, let's say, default, for instance. So we're just seeing the wireframe as it is. We could go on, say, wire and shaded textured. So we can see both the textures and the wireframe. This will be especially good when you're doing like sort of breakdown of your scene for a portfolio. You know, being able to showcase the actual topology of your scene. That would be absolutely fantastic to showcase. And again, you can do like say shaded as well, which is just no textures whatsoever. So this is some really cool options that you do have that you can use. Wire on shaded, for instance, would be a fantastic one as well. So again, it just shows light information and topology of your scene. Now the next one we're going to look at is the Arnold renderer. This is a much more high detailed renderer. So if you go on here, I will be leaving a link to Solid Angle's website. So if I could quickly show you here, Solid Angle is actually the company that created Arnold, and it goes into great depth as to what each of these settings are. So for instance, camera AA is basically the ambient occlusion, and everything else here for diffuse glossy reflection, that stands for subsurface scattering, and volume indirect is basically trying to eliminate any sort of extra noise that you get from the scene. So you can play around with these as much as you like. But you'll notice that there is a particular issue when it comes to using Arnold. If I render it out right now, and again, it might take a bit of time. Arnold is quite a high demanding piece of software, so it could just take a couple of minutes. That's why you always want to make sure that you are rendering out at a lower image. But you can kind of see what's happening right now. We do have our direction light and ambient light, but for some reason our point light isn't showing. So why is that? What's the issue here right now? Well, there's a number of things that we need to do to make sure that we can see our point light. So if I just escape really quick, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly just turn down the resolution on this, just so if we have to render it again, it won't take as long. I'm going to just render this out to 6 by 480, so it's still semi-decent size. Okay. So with the light, what's happening is that it has a bit of that Arnold automatically puts on the decay rate. So how does sort of light disperse across distances? Default when it comes to Hardware 2.0 and in the basic Maya scene is that we have no decay. I've got to like say quadratic, which is sort of like real world decay of light. You can see it's pretty much non-existent here. So what we can do is under the Arnold setting, we can increase the exposure to say okay, we want to expose this a bit more. I want to turn off normalize, and increase the radius as well. So about 10. You may also want to go to the actual camera settings as well, so the camera attributes, and under Arnold you can also increase the exposure, so to say how much light's in there. So at default it's at 1. You may want to whack it up to maybe 2 or 3. Don't go any higher than 4 because it becomes way too bright and it does not look good at all. So if I render out again, hopefully we should be able to see some of that point light. Okay, so as you can see right now, a little bit of that point light has come through. Not a lot of it, but there's a bit of it there. So what we could do is if we go back to the point light options, maybe whack up the exposure, maybe even increase the radius to about, say, 50. Let's see what happens then. Yikes, that's most likely because the exposure is way too high, if anything else. Yeah, it's a bit too high now. So we can whack that down to possibly 2.5, I'm going to say. Maybe make that about 20. Let's try that again. You'll find when it comes to rendering, you're going to have to be playing around with a lot of settings just to get some stuff working. Yeah, that's looking a lot better. So let's try 40 and see what happens. It's looking better, but we can definitely see that it's just pointing out one direction. So maybe if I just move the actual light itself in the middle, that probably solved the issue itself. So maybe if I moved it there, let's see how the scene looks now. That does look a lot better. You might have noticed that there are some noise here as well, so we can probably get rid of some of that noise in the actual Arnold settings here. So maybe increase these by about 3 or 4. So if you put this to 4, for instance, let's see what happens. Maybe that to a 4. See now that I have rendered out this image, most likely I've probably jump cut it or cut this in a video editor because it did take a couple of minutes to actually render out this particular frame, even at a sub HD quality. So you can see here how much memory it took. So it took almost a gig, wow, just to do this one image. So you can imagine how memory intensive a film's going to be if this just one, it is just like almost 1 gig. So you can see rendering time took 2 minutes 24 seconds. We're using the perspective, Arnold renderer, and the resolution size there as well. So once you're happy with your image, what you can do then is go to File, Save Image, and what you can do is you can change the file type. So you got PNG, you got JPEG, PSD as well. You got a whole variety of image types that you want. So I'm going to go for, like, say, JPEG, and just call it, say, render. So I'll call it, like, say, render North train station. I'm not going to save it right now because I don't need to save it. But yeah, you could render this out as a single image to put onto your portfolio or to showcase to potential employees. So it is well worth rendering out a scene in order to showcase your models in the highest quality possible. So in class, if you're watching this during the lighting lesson, make sure that you do definitely render out your image and upload it to Moodle or upload it to Google Drive, whatever I've given you guys to upload this work, because it'll be well worth showcasing it off in class or to your peers.